I can't tell you how excited I am for this. Naruto was the first anime I watched as a kid. I remember coming home from elementary school and like Cartoon Network had it on, and it got me hooked. It got me hooked on anime.
That's that's very encouraging. I'm glad to hear that there's a lot more people like you than you would think.
Oh, I'm sure. I looked at this line and I looked over it and I'm like, this is really cool.
Super. We have some pretty cool stuff. So we have two lines right now. So this is the Anime Hero line, right? And Anime Heroes really started off as an offshoot of the Dragon Ball Dragon Stars collection, right? So one of the things that
Yeah.
Bandai does, right? We have all the Dragon Ball figures, right? And specifically, we have this line of 6.5-inch action figures called Dragon Stars, right? And it's 18 points of articulation and all the kind of stuff that we would expect from top-notch action figures. And they've done really, really well. So well, in fact, that we had the great idea, like, well, what if we were to do the same kind of action figure for the best anime that's out there, right? And so the idea of
Yeah.
Anime Heroes was born. And Anime Heroes really is an umbrella brand that serves two purposes. One, it is to introduce fans, right, who may not be familiar with the action with the anime, and create really high quality at a great price point action figures, right? And then it also introduces fans to new IP, right, which makes the Anime Heroes brand stronger, such that when we introduce a brand new property, people will see it like, oh, I'm a Naruto fan and I saw this on the shelf right next to it. What's this? Right. And then they pick up that what's this box, right? And they understand, like, oh, it's this property. Let me learn a little bit more about it. And then it creates this wonderful feedback loop where we get to create more and more characters every season, and get to talk like awesome people like you about like what they love so much about the anime, right? And why it's so important, that we keep this thing going, because anime is not going anywhere, right? It's no longer a niche thing, right? People would talk about, maybe 5 years ago, like, oh, anime is for people who do this, right? And you could sort of
Oh yeah.
have an idea in your mind what the anime fan was all about. But I don't think that's true. Not so much now, and I don't think it's changed. It's just become more visible now, right? And as a result, it's so mainstream that it has basically taken over every piece of media that's out there, whether it's on television or online or even just walking around in the street.
I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I was part of the anime club, and I think there was like 5 of us. This is, I want to say, early 2010s.
Okay.
And then now, because I work in a middle school, it's all over the place. I have kids walking up to me like, Miss L, do you know what this is? It's a really old anime, and I'm like, it's not that old. It came out when I was in high school, but I know what it is.
Yeah.
But you just see these small things becoming more mainstream, and I really enjoy seeing it. I mean, I like the action heroes line. So, just to start off, how many points of articulation are we talking about with these guys?
16 plus, right? And
Oh wow.
obviously it sort of depends on the figure, right? And the overall form factor and what it's actually like, right? Depending on if they're wearing something, the points of articulation are still underneath there, right? But if they have like a long coat or something like that, it still moves, but there's an extra piece of plastic around it, right? And
Yeah.
so it varies, but pretty much your 16 points plus is the standard, that we have at a minimum for all the stuff in the Anime Heroes line. So Anime Heroes started off with this guy right here. So this is the Naruto line, right? And we started basically with three main characters, right? We started with Naruto over here, and then we had Kakashi and Sasuke, right? And so what I'll do is I will switch to a close-up camera to give all you folks at home, just an idea of what we're looking at. So I'm going to scooch these guys over here. I'm going to move these guys over here, right? And this will give you a pretty good idea in terms of like what this overall line is about, right? So I will start with Naruto, right? And again, one of the things that Bandai does better than anybody else, right? It's a spot-on interpretation from the anime to the action figure, right? And so if you get a close-up on his face, I mean, it looks just like them, right? And from an engineering point of view, that's really hard, right? Especially a
I mean,
human face, right?
I've seen figures that are anime accurate that are like in the hundreds, and it's very hard to get something that looks anime like for a lower price than what you can typically see. So that's great detail right there.
Yeah, I mean, even the smallest details like the eyes, right? Like they really pop out and they're expressive, right? And for
Oh
just a
yeah.
little bit of paint on plastic, the fact that we've been able to do this, pretty exciting. And then, we have Kakashi right here, right? So again, like just the level of detail, front, side, and back. And some of this stuff they're separate pieces. So like the pouch that he has in his back, it's not molded plastic. It's actually a separate piece that's there, right? We didn't have to, but we chose to, right? So it's about that level of detail that we're really, really making sure that the anime fan is really excited about, right? And then, go ahead.
I really like the details on these. I mean, they're very spot on.
Yeah. And then our two newest figures, right? Over here, let me scooch over this way. We have Minato, right? So this is Naruto's father, right? So again, like everything from the trench coat on the back to the detail in the front, right? It's something that we really, really want to make sure that we're taking care of the fans that brought us here in the first place. And each of these guys, they have their own unique accessories and like they come with, different sets of hands. So even if I take a look at the packaging over here, let me make sure he doesn't fall over, right? So if you look at the packaging, right? So there's 4 different sets of hands, including the weapons that exist as well, right? And again, if you look at here's the animation and here's the figure, right? Like the whole point is if they don't look like they should in the show, we're kind of missing the whole boat, right? So it's really important that we take our time when we select our characters of what's going to be the best and most faithful representation of what these characters are all about, right? And then I think Naruto's pretty close, but if you look at the overall expression, so this is Gaara, right? But even the overall expression of Gaara in the face with the eyes that just pop out, it's almost eerie, right? Just like how spot on he is from the show. So this is the latest one that just came out a few months ago. And so we're really, really excited. And he has the accessories in the back, right? And the good news is with these guys is that we're going to be making more of them, right? So this line has been extremely successful, right? We can barely keep them in stock. They're available everywhere, right? Like Amazon, Target, Walmart. Right?
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, they're everywhere. $19.99, right? Like that's pretty hard to beat. I mean, there are figures out there upwards of $40, $50 and statues, right? That are every
I've seen them in the hundreds.
Exactly. But the cool thing, right, is that you can change the expression just by the pose, right? Like, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but they're action figures. You can change how they look and their expression and everything from, the slightest detail from one to the other, right? Like even as a little demonstration, right? I know you have your collection and you're an artist yourself, but the difference between something like this and then you twist the hand a little bit and then you bring it forward, like that changes the expression and the personality of that character, right? Like you change the story that they're telling. And that's something that I think that action figures does that regular static statues don't do, right? And that's something that we want to be able to help the fans express their fandom in the best way possible.
I mean, I was going to agree with you on the static. I mean, I've seen most action figures, and sometimes the posability isn't all too easy to get. And instead of having something static and just standing there looking just really like a chunk of plastic, something movable and fluid, like these guys, you can pose. They come with little stands. You can interchange the hands. You can do posing out of the show or the anime. And I think that's great.
Right. And so when when this started really taking off and doing really successful, right? The next logical question is, well, what's going to be the next property, right? That's going to come after Naruto, right? And so if you think of all the best anime that exist out there, right? We said like, well, it has to be One Piece, right? Like it can't not be One Piece, right? In terms of it's still going on. There's like 900 plus episodes. And so these guys came out the end of April and they are doing every bit as well as Naruto is, right? And so here, right, like we have our Straw Hat Pirates, right? So, you know, moving from front to left to right, right? So we start off with Luffy, right? And of course, you have to have Luffy, right? But again, like the level of expression in his face, right? And what's funny with Luffy, like he's a skinny guy, right? And to say that you're making a skinny action figure, that's really hard. So when I first saw the models, I'm like, how are we going to do this? Like, how is a skinny action figure going to work? But when I saw him come off the line, I'm like, okay, like we were able to pull it off. So we're really, really happy with how it is, right? So that's Luffy over here. Yeah. And then we have Sanji, right? And again, like the detail, even from the eyebrow, right? So he has a curly eyebrow, right? That's going to be over one eye versus the other, right? And it's in continuity. So it's right after the time skip in terms of when it happened. But even still, like the overall expression, and he has the fire on his foot, right? That can be switched from one to the other, right? And then my own personal favorite, if I can keep him from falling over because kind of clumsy so today. And then this is my personal favorite. This is Zorro, right? And obviously Zorro, greatest swordsman of all time, right? Like he has just this fantastic detail in his coat. And like, if you look at the swords that he has, like they come out, like they're not molded plastic. Like you can actually remove them all the way, right? And
wow.
Yeah, exactly. And there's room for 3. So you can sort of see like there's the third hole that's there that he's holding right here. So we want to make sure that it's true to the anime because of course he fights with 3 swords at the same time. But even the level of detail in his face and his hair, and even when you look at the overall packaging, so I'm going to scooch the packaging over this side. But with something like Zorro, like look at all that stuff that you're getting, right? You have the 3 swords, you have the extra set of hands, right? Like for $19, right? You kind of just have to.
And I think it carries over the anime style because I like One Piece, but I always thought that style would be relatively difficult to carry over to action figures, but it does. It carries over very well.
Yeah, and anime, obviously anime is very subjective, right? And it's hard, right, to make those figures that are practical, right? Someone asked me like, well, why don't you have like Zorro being able to hold a sword in his mouth, right? Because that's what he does in the show, right? And yes, right, but mechanically, to be able to have him hold the sword in the size of a 6.5 inch, like it wouldn't scale, right? So there are choices that we have to make when we're creating something where we're like, okay, we get it, but we want it to be as versatile as possible. And to be able to have that hinge in the mouth to hold the sword and not look not right, right? That's one of the ones that we say like, okay, maybe at another time, right? But in terms of what this line is supposed to do, I think we knocked it out of the park. Another really cool thing about this line, right, is each of the packaging, you put them together, imagine having all of these together. It's like a manga collection, right? And
that's actually awesome.
Isn't that cool, right? And as we add new lines and these things, you know, start growing into like we have 4 IP and 5 IP, like you're going to be able to have this on your bookshelf, right? And it's not like by accident, like we did it on purpose. So it's a neat little thing to really say like, hey, we are committed to making sure that we're spreading the word of anime as much as possible because it's not going anywhere, right? Like there's Taco Bell commercials about it. It was the opening title sequence of the Olympics that just happened, right? So anime is this thing that has surfaced, that's been underwater for a while, and it's only getting bigger and more people, not just, you know, kids, but people who grew up with it, right? Like they're finding it again for the first time, right? Whether it's on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or whatever it might be, like these entire streaming platforms, right? they're having their own sections when before it was just like onesie twosies, right? But now you can go pretty deep, and we're not talking like a Funimation or Crunchyroll, right? We're talking mainstream,
Oh yeah.
over the top platforms that have hundreds of hours of content. So it's a fantastic place to be.
I've always been more of a fan of manga than comics. 'Cause I
Mm-hmm.
feel like manga, you get the straightforward storytelling. You don't get a million reimaginings of the same superhero origin. And to get more stuff mainstream, like these
Mm-hmm.
two lines,
Yeah.
I feel it was really great because $20, over 18 points of articulation, which I feel for most action figures is hard to get.
Yeah.
And to come equipped with like you can pose them, you get all these accessories, and you can interchange the hands. I think it's a really nifty idea, and I'm hoping I can see more of my favorite Naruto characters. Cause I know you're putting out some more, and I'm like,
We
I
are
just
we are. I can't say anything just yet. But it's funny because people will often ask like, okay, well, what's going to be the next character, right? And obviously, there's like dozens upon dozens of characters in Naruto that we're thinking about all the time, right? So we have to say like, what's going to fit best for this line at this point in time, right? Is it a brand new character? Is it a version of another character? Is it a different costume? Like there's all these different things that we can do because we want to make sure that it's familiar enough that people who are really getting into this line, they want like the cool version of this character, right? Versus here's a character that's a little bit deeper so that people can even appreciate it more, right? So it's a balancing act that we're always trying to walk that line.
if I can hear like a Lady Tsunade or a Jiraiya, you're gonna sell this for me 100% more because I mean you guys got my favorite characters already. You got Kakashi, you got Gaara, Naruto. Great. I'm just really excited to see where this goes. And I don't know if you can divulge this, but I'm also really interested to see what other figure get put out in this line
In this
for
line.
anime wise.
Well, I can't divulge which actual character it is, right? But what I can say is that it won't be a surprise, right? It'll be one of those ones where when you see it, people are going to recognize, oh, I know what that is, right? It's not going to be so this character only showed up in like 2 episodes, right? It's not going to be something, it's going to be broad enough, right? That everyone's going to recognize like, oh, it's this character, but it's going to be narrow enough where it's like, oh, this is a deeper look at this popular character, right?
Yeah.
And it's something, and we're releasing more than one, right? So it's not just another character, right? What we want to be able to do is we want to be to release multiple characters, right? Such that every season we release 2 at a time, 3 at a time, right? And depending on how long it takes to make the figures, right? So in the case of like Minato and Gaara, these guys were maybe like 3 or 4 months apart. So we release them 1 at a time, right? But wherever we can and the calendar lines up and the factories and they make them and all that kind of stuff, if we can release 2 at a time, that's sort of our ideal that we like to do because it just makes a little bit more of a splash. So that's sort of what we're looking like for the upcoming spring. So around like March-ish, we'll have some new characters that we think you'll enjoy.
I'm glad. So I'm a little interested to know the process behind these. I mean, just in terms of, what do you pick? How do you like pick what accessories to add in?
Mhm.
Could you divulge a little about that?
Sure, of course. So it really starts with a character in the story, right? Because you have to think about what is it that makes anime as compelling as it is, right? It's not just animated content, right? It's different, right? It's long form content that is continuous for hundreds of hours sometimes, right? Which means that fans, if they're watching 300 episodes of something and you're looking at 100 hours or more of content, you're going to get emotionally attached to these characters, right? And if you're emotionally attached to a character, you have a little more, I think for lack of a better word, patience in terms of what that action figure might entail, right? So you can have like the little detail in the clothing or in the face or something that the newbie might not recognize. They'll recognize, oh, it's that character, right? But fans who really go deep and who are really invested, they'll see the little differences, right? And that little difference is going to make all the difference, right? And so when we introduce a new character, for example, for the first time, so let's have a new Naruto character. Let's just call him like Dave. It's not going to be Dave, but let's just say there is a character called Dave, right? And we're going to introduce him for the first time. What we'll probably do is we'll say, what is the most familiar version of Dave that Naruto fans recognize, right? And what would be those most iconic looks, right? Is it the very first time he appeared? And then in which case then we would sort of have the decoration and the costume and the face like that? Or is it we would have that version of Dave that everyone knows who would know about Dave, right? So it's almost like if you're watching like a TV show and once the show starts hitting its stride, they'll change the hair or the makeup or the clothing on a character, right? And it just kind of gets out there, right? And the perfect example I can give is like, and I'm jumping universes, but like Star Trek, right? So in Deep Space Nine, before Captain Cisco like was Captain Cisco, like he didn't have the goatee and the shaved head, right? It wasn't until he hit his stride that that's that version. It's the same thing, right? So when we introduce a new character for the first time, we want to make sure it's that version that everyone knows, right? And then later on, if we introduce another version of Dave, then maybe we go backwards. Maybe we say, this is the first time Dave appeared, right? Or maybe we go forwards. This is the version of Dave when he powered up to this version of himself, right? So it really depends on the first time a character will appear versus how deep we want to go in the storytelling, right? To make sure that the hardcore fans will appreciate it, but enough of the more casual fans appreciate it as well, because we want to make sure that we introduce people to the IP, to the anime that maybe have never seen it before, or they're familiar with it, but it's not until they, oh, what is this? Oh, I recognize this character. Let me look a little bit more about it. And the next thing you know, they're watching an episode or two, right? And then once they watch an episode or two, then they really start enjoying and getting into more anime, such that when we have a new property like One Piece, we can do that thing, right? So that's sort of the thing we think about when we're trying to choose a new character.
I mean, I enjoyed it, and I could tell because you have Naruto when Naruto ship it in, and then you have him a little later on when he goes into the Sage mode. And that little detail just make it for me. Which leads me to my next question that you probably can't answer, but are we going to be looking at like early Naruto figures, or maybe going into like the Boruto designs with an older Naruto and Sasuke?
So we never say never, right? But we do think about this stuff all the time, right? Whenever, and it's not like we say, what are we going to release next season? We're thinking like years ahead, right? We're saying if we're going to even introduce Naruto as a property overall, how long are we going to let this run for, right? Or if we introduce a brand new anime, like, are there enough characters with enough variety that it's going to make sense, right? So here's an example. If we're looking for a new property to put into Anime Heroes, and it's property XYZ, right? We first have to look at, is it a property that's well known enough that people are going to be like, oh, it's that property, I want to buy the action figure, right? That's like step one, because it has to be popular enough. If it's so deep that it's really obscure and it's only had like one season, it might not necessarily be the best choice for a new line, right? But let's say we do decide on this one property, then we say, how many different characters are different enough with enough versions of themselves to lend themselves to a line, right? If it's only like two characters that are the most well-known and they have like, for lack of a better word, like two costume changes, we have to compare that to another anime where you have 7 versions of a character, right? Look at what we've done with Dragon Ball and like Dragon Stars, right? There's like 8 versions of Goku, right? So like that's kind of the gold standard where we can go really, really deep and have versions that everyone knows and loves. That's sort of the gold standard of what we're going after. But specifically for Anime Heroes, right? We want to be able to find the anime that is current, right? That people are talking about now, as well as going back into the vault and sort of visiting an old anime friend that maybe people haven't talked about in a while, right? And
Yeah.
so we want to be able to balance the old with the new because people are rediscovering anime at different points in time because they're all available, right? You could discover One Piece 2 years from now, right? And it's
Oh
still
yeah.
going, right? So in terms of what are our next characters for One Piece, and I know what they are, but I ain't going to tell. Like we have to figure out how far back do we go, or is there a character that's really gotten popular over the next couple of years, and we're going to do that one instead, right? So there's lots of different possibilities. It's just how do we want to tell that anime story?
I, for one, am excited because, like with Dragon Ball Z, 8 Gokus, and I imagine they're even more now than when I walked like a
Yeah,
kid. One Piece, you could do a million things you could do with One Piece.
there's
I'm
like
not even caught
700
up yet,
named characters. Yeah, so I'm not saying we're going to do 700, but there's plenty to choose from.
but like I'm not even caught up with One Piece yet
Yeah, I don't think
because there's a lot of One Piece.
it's a time commitment. Don't get a dog, because if you start
I
watching.
mean, especially with like the growth of like Shippuden and Shonen Jump anime, there's so much you can do with it now compared to when I was younger and I was trying to find Naruto stuff and all you could really find were the headbands at,
Right.
Walmart. There's diversity in this now, which I really think is great, especially for younger audiences. I mean, I can easily picture many, many kids
Mm-hmm.
walking into Walmart and being like, hey, mom,
Yeah.
this is the anime. And
That's what
it's
that's
great.
what we're starting to see. Like these are the superheroes that have always existed, right? And they will continue to exist because there's nothing that they don't have that your sort of classic superheroes haven't already demonstrated, right? It's just long form content that keeps going on that really engages a viewer. And so we're really excited to come out with a line that really, tells the story and provides a great reflection of the person who wants to own that figure, right? Like action figures tell
Oh,
you a
yeah.
lot about yourself besides just the property. Like if I'm going to collect and I'm going to collect this one versus that one, like there's a reason. There's a reason why
Yeah.
I watch One Piece and someone else watches another IP, right? So the fact that you own these things is self-reflexive, right? It says something about you, which I think is something that very few other products have.
I mean, it's really great, and I really do enjoy the box art because I'm not one for keeping action figure boxes just because most of the time they really don't appeal to me. But I like the idea that you can stick these on a shelf.
Yeah,
They look like a volume pack, thing you would see. I'm very excited for it, and I love it,
we'll make
and
more. So
I can't wait. Honestly, I mean,
well,
especially
all of these are available now, right? And then there's going to
yeah,
be coming in just a few weeks. We can't reveal it yet, but literally in just a few weeks, we're going to have 2 new characters in One Piece that are
yeah.
going to be in stores, probably be like Octoberish. So just wait and see. You'll be happy.
Especially because I saw what was it, Saint Sonia. I haven't watched that one yet, but
Mm-hmm.
I know people who do.
Yeah.
And that, for me, I feel like a little bit of like an obscure anime that's catching on nowadays.
Yeah. It has
Because
a pretty loyal following. So that was the Saint Seiya line that we released right about the same time as Naruto. They look absolutely gorgeous, right? It's a smaller audience just because it never really quite caught on in U.S. markets, but it has a small but passionate following.
I know I saw it on Netflix the other day, and I'm like,
Yeah, have a new version.
what is this getting popular again?
Yeah.
It's always interesting to see what catches on anime mainstream nowadays.
Well, all you have to do is wait 6 months, right? Like people
I
are
know.
binging stuff now, so you don't have to wait every week for discovering something for the first time again. So.
I mean, I have Crunchyroll and like Funimation, and I'm watching anime that came out in like '76,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting, and I think the figures are really gonna do well with introducing new people into it,
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
because I can just see people just taking this home, and then their friends are seeing it, and it's all that. I love it.
Glad to be of service. So more to come.
I'm excited.